Hello there, and welcome. Well, I don't have an interview today, but I'm hoping to get an interview soon. I've extracted a promise for one from a friend, so we'll see, okay? But today I want to talk about the subject I was working on when I stopped filming these. It's temper. Teachers need to understand their own tempers. You know, it's interesting if you think about temperament. That's a kind of a quality of your personality. Well, your temper is right at the center of it. What gets you angry and how you get angry. And unfortunately, many people do not consider how they lose their temper. They don't think about it. And we really should. We should consider how we lose our temper, what causes us to lose our tempers, and how we can mitigate the worst effects of that. One of the things that was obvious between my brother and I was that we did not have at all the same temper. John had a temper much like my mother's. It was fast, it was hot, but he'd get mad, he'd express it, and he'd be over it. That would be it. The McCollums, my father's side and myself, have a different type of temper. It is not quick, it's not hot, but it is kind of, I found it and find it in myself a little bit worrying because it's what some people might call a slow burn. We can be mad about something for a long time, and that's not very healthy. And a little thing can bug us, and we'll not say anything about it right away. And we'll let that irritation go on and on and on. And then when we finally reach the end of our patience, we express anger in a really devastating way. And that is also not the healthiest way. I actually think John's style of temper is healthier than mine. And I have spent a good deal of my life trying to learn something about my temper and learn to address it in a way that's healthy. I have not conquered it, and I'm not sure that human beings can conquer their own natures. But we can understand them, and we can find ways to mitigate their worst qualities. So, John, over time, I think, became a more sensitive person, and therefore became more empathetic to his students, and therefore was less likely to lose his temper. He once told me a story about getting angry at one of his classes. He got mad at one of his classes. He didn't tell me what made him mad, but he described grabbing his walking stick and walking out of the building because he was angry. Well, first of all, I think that's, if you are really truly angry at your students, the best way to deal with it is to leave. Even if it feels a little bit risky leaving the room, if you are truly about to blow your stack, you need to be away from them. Because you are the boss, and the boss should not ever be out of control. So you need to be in control, and that means you have to hold that temper in check. And he felt his temper really rising really fast, and he walked out of the building, and he took his walking stick with him, and he hit the building with it. It was a brick building, and it shattered his walking stick. And he really loved that walking stick. It was one of his favorites. It had a silver cap on it. And when he did that, it immediately quelled his temper and embarrassed him. And it was a moment of real reckoning for him, thinking about, I can't afford to do that. I can't afford to be a hothead as a teacher. Now, because I have a different type of temper, I was less likely to have to leave the room. But there were times that I got really too angry at my students. They were very early on in my career. But I quickly learned the best way to deal with them was this. I acted angry before I became angry. If I felt something that students were doing or saying would make me actually angry, I would act angry before I felt angry. Because, and that may seem counterintuitive because you don't want your students to be trying to, quote, press your buttons, unquote. All right? But they need to understand that they have an agency in your experience, and their agency matters. And part of what shows it matters is you react to it. And so if I knew my reaction was going to get bad because I know what kind of temper I have, I let them know I was angry before I actually felt angry. Now think about that. I act mad before I feel mad. Am I pretending? Not really. What I'm doing is anticipating and signaling so that when my students start to do things that cross a line, they know that they've crossed the line. And by anticipating this, I actually prevent myself from getting truly angry. I'm merely bothered. And you might think, well, that's counterintuitive. If the kids can get to you, won't they keep wanting to get to you? Certain young people will. And you'll figure them out relatively quickly if they're absolutely determined to become a problem. You'll figure them out, and you'll have to strategize ways to deal with them differently than other students. But generally speaking, most people are not really that dedicated to the project of making a teacher insane. So by signaling to them that they've crossed a line, you're also signaling to them that they have agency in the room, and that is important. They need to know that part of what they're doing is creating an environment. And if they create an environment that feels uncomfortable for the room, then they will bear the responsibility for that. The subtle signals of social disdain will come at them when they begin to cross the line. And that way they'll begin to learn, okay, I can go this far, but if I get this far, then I need to back off. That learning, that element of learning is important because it allows them to know where the limits are in a public social setting, and especially in a setting that might turn into a work setting, because there are work settings that are like that as well. Now, I don't pretend to be particularly gifted socially. I'm not. But I do like the classroom. And I do feel that there are ways that you can express your experience to the students without interfering with their learning. I think John and I both learned that by being open with the students and also demonstrative with our feelings, we can actually be more effective, because the deepness of the honesty of the feeling is what really matters. And other students become irritated when a student is acting out. That may not be apparent all the time. Sometimes a student who's acting out is actually being amusing to the other students, and that can be a kind of a vicious cycle. But getting away from that, if a student is just being a pill, the other students will work in a subtle way to try to make them settle down. And by using the community as an expression of the group, using the room as a group that works together, including the teacher, then everybody benefits from this expression of, okay, you've gotten to me, you've bothered me, now you need to stop. I hope this makes some sort of sense. I had it really better yesterday, but the but the camera ran out of juice. So this second half is sort of yeah, just a way to try to get off this pony. Anyway, I hope you have a glorious rest of the day, and I hope you see me again, you gorgeous people.